Rain hung in the air again, lighter now, barely falling. A single streetlight glowed above them, turning wet pavement into a dull shine. Aaron stood still. Pete was close. Close enough to feel his warmth. Close enough to hear his breath slow to match hers. His hand hovered near her waist, not touching, waiting. This was the moment people talked about later. The moment they edited. The moment they turned into a story about timing or luck or fate. But standing there, none of that mattered. What mattered was the choice pressing against her chest. She had planned tonight carefully. Not for him. For herself. She had walked out into the rain knowing she was afraid. Afraid of being late. Afraid of starting something she could not control. Afraid of admitting she wanted more from her own life. Now the fear returned. Sharper, quieter. Step forward, and something would change. Step back, and nothing would. Her heart beat hard, not from desire alone, but from the weight of finally deciding. First times were never about perfection. They were about courage. Under that streetlight, with rain cooling her skin and uncertainty filling the space between them, Aaron understood one truth with sudden clarity. This night was never about being chosen. It was about choosing. Have you ever prepared for a night like it carried more weight than it should? Not because of who you were meeting, because of who you were trying to become. Have you ever felt late to your own life? Like everyone else received a quiet signal to begin, and you somehow missed yours. Aaron knew that feeling well. She had watched milestones arrive for other people with ease. First loves. First risks. First chances taken without a second thought. Meanwhile, she learned patience so deeply, it began to feel like hesitation. People never said anything cruel. They did not have to. Questions arrived gently. Smiles lingered a second too long. Advice came wrapped as concern. There is still time. You are doing fine. It will happen when you are ready. But readiness can turn into a hiding place. Some nights carry the weight of every moment you delayed, every step you talked yourself out of, every choice you postponed because fear sounded practical. Aaron did not step into the rain because she felt fearless. She stepped out because she was tired of waiting for fear to loosen its grip. If you have ever stood at the edge of a decision like that, you already understand her. You know the quiet pressure. You know the way time can feel personal. And you know how heavy one night can become when it feels like a beginning. There is a pressure people rarely talk about. It does not shout. It does not rush you. It waits. It shows up when you scroll past announcements, when conversations drift toward timelines, when silence follows a simple question about your life. It tells you there is a right order, a right age, a right pace. Aaron carried that pressure quietly. She told herself she was fine. She focused on work. She stayed busy. She learned how to look settled even when she felt paused inside. No one warned her how easy it was to confuse comfort with safety. The problem was not that she lacked opportunity. The problem was how long she let fear negotiate on her behalf. Fear always sounds reasonable. It asks for more time. It asks for certainty. It asks you to wait until you feel ready. But readiness does not arrive on its own. Standing under that awning earlier, soaked and stranded, Aaron felt the truth press in. If she went home again, nothing bad would happen. But nothing new would either. That realization mattered more than the rain, more than the canceled ride, more than the night falling apart. Some moments test whether you want comfort or growth. This night was one of them. And Aaron had reached the point where staying still felt heavier than moving forward. What happens when a night meant to prove something falls apart? And instead of retreating, you keep going. Aaron did not know Pete. He was not part of her plan. He was not the reason she stepped outside. Yet there he was. Calm, present, unrushed. And suddenly the question shifted. Not will this work out, but will I allow myself to stay open? Some nights do not give you what you expected. They give you something more honest. A pause. A conversation without performance. A moment where you feel seen without being evaluated. This was not a story about instant connection. It was about what happens when two people meet without masks. As they stood beneath that streetlight, with rain easing and the city holding its breath, Aaron understood something quietly powerful. The night was no longer about whether someone would choose her. It was about whether she would choose to remain present in a moment she could easily step away from. And that choice would shape everything that followed. Because one unexpected night does not change your life by force. It changes your life by invitation. The question was simple. Would she accept it? Before this story goes any further, pause for a moment. Stories like this are not about grand gestures. They are about ordinary people standing at quiet crossroads. If you have ever faced a night where fear and courage stood side by side, if you have ever wondered whether starting late meant starting wrong, if you believe love grows best where honesty leads, then you are in the right place. This channel exists for stories rooted in real choices. Stories where connection grows slowly. Stories where people learn something about themselves before finding someone else. If that speaks to you, take a second to subscribe. You will find stories here that value growth, patience, and emotional truth. And as you listen, keep one thought close. This is not a story about being rescued by a stranger. It is a story about what happens after someone decides to stop hiding from their own life. Because the night Aaron stepped into did not begin with romance. It began with courage, and everything that followed grew from there. Before this story goes any further, pause for a moment. Stories like this are not about grand gestures. They are about ordinary people standing at quiet crossroads. If you have ever faced a night where fear and courage stood side by side, if you have ever wondered whether starting late meant starting wrong, if you believe love grows best where honesty leads, then you are in the right place. This channel exists for stories rooted in real choices. Stories where connection grows slowly. Stories where people learn something about themselves before finding someone else. If that speaks to you, take a second to subscribe. You will find stories here that value growth, patience, and emotional truth. And as you listen, keep one thought close. This is not a story about being rescued by a stranger. It is a story about what happens after someone decides to stop hiding from their own life. Because the night Aaron stepped into did not begin with romance. It began with courage, and everything that followed grew from there. Aaron stood in her apartment longer than she needed to. Her bag rested by the door. Her shoes waited neatly beside it. Everything was ready, yet she remained still, fingers pressed lightly against the edge of the table as if grounding herself. She told herself she was calm, but calm and steady were not the same. Her thoughts moved in quiet loops. What if tonight felt forced? What if she realized she had waited too long? What if nothing changed at all? She did not think about the person she was meant to meet. That felt distant, abstract. What weighed on her was the meaning she had attached to leaving that door. Going out meant admitting she wanted more. Staying in meant keeping peace with the familiar. She had chosen safety many times before. It had never hurt her. It had simply kept her still. As she reached for her coat, a single thought cut through the noise. If she turned back now, tomorrow would look exactly the same. Aaron did not rush while getting ready. She moved with care, not from vanity, but from intention. Each small action felt like a quiet agreement with herself. She smoothed her dress, adjusted the clasp at her neck, checked her reflection once more, then again. Not to search for perfection, to recognize herself. She chose clothes that felt like her. Soft, simple, familiar. Nothing that asked her to perform. Nothing that made her feel like she was borrowing confidence. In the bathroom mirror, she paused longer than expected. Her expression looked steady, but her eyes held something unresolved. She brushed her hair slowly, pinning it back, knowing it would likely fall loose later. The thought made her smile faintly. This was not about impressing anyone. It was about showing up honestly. Before turning off the light, she took one breath, deep and measured. Tonight did not need to be flawless. It needed to be real. Tonight mattered because Aaron had been postponing herself. Not in obvious ways. Not through regret or sadness. Through patience that stayed too long. Through telling herself there was no hurry. Through believing progress needed a perfect opening. She had learned how to be responsible early. Careful choices followed. Safe routines settled in. Over time, caution became habit, and habit felt like wisdom. But wisdom began to feel heavy. She noticed how often she delayed small risks. How often she waited until she felt fully certain. How easily she dismissed her own wants as something to revisit later. Later kept moving. This night was not about romance. It was about momentum. She wanted proof she could choose action without knowing the outcome. She wanted to feel present inside her own decisions again. Leaving her apartment meant admitting she deserved experiences, even imperfect ones. Tonight mattered because it marked the moment she stopped waiting for permission. Arin did not think of her past as broken. Nothing dramatic stood out. No single moment she could point to and explain everything. Her hesitations came from smaller places, from habits built slowly, from choosing steadiness again and again because it felt responsible. She had said no when yes felt risky. She had delayed when action felt uncertain. She had learned how to manage disappointment by avoiding its door. People praised her for being level-headed, dependable, thoughtful. Those words followed her often. She wore them well, even when they began to feel like walls. There were moments she remembered quietly. Invitations declined. Chances passed without regret at the time. Only later did she notice how often she stayed behind while life moved forward. She did not blame herself for that. She simply recognized it. Tonight was not about fixing the past. It was about refusing to repeat it out of habit. The promise came quietly, not written down, not spoken aloud. It formed one night when Arin realized how often she waited for certainty before allowing herself to begin. She promised she would stop using fear as a schedule. She promised she would stop measuring her life against invisible clocks. She promised she would act even when confidence arrived second. That promise did not demand bold moves or dramatic change. It asked for honesty. It asked her to notice when hesitation disguised itself as wisdom. Tonight was her first test. Leaving her apartment meant honoring that promise without knowing how the night would end. She understood she might feel awkward. She understood disappointment was possible. She understood nothing was guaranteed. Still, she chose to go. The promise was simple. When opportunity appeared, she would meet it with presence, not delay. Keeping that promise mattered more than the outcome. Time had always felt personal to Arin. Not rushed, not cruel, just watchful. She noticed it during conversations that drifted toward achievements, during casual updates shared with ease, during moments when she felt content one minute, then quietly questioned herself the next. She did not envy other lives. She respected them. Still, comparison found her in small ways. It whispered questions she never asked out loud. Am I moving fast enough? Did I miss something important? She answered those thoughts with logic. Everyone moves differently. There is no deadline. Those answers were true, yet incomplete. What weighed on her was not time itself. It was the pressure she placed on her own pace. She realized waiting for comfort had become its own form of strain. Tonight was her way of releasing that weight. Not by racing forward, by choosing to move at all. The rain arrived without warning. One moment, the air felt calm. The street hummed softly with passing cars and distant voices. The next, drops struck the pavement hard enough to change the sound of everything around her. Conversations broke. Footsteps quickened. The rhythm of the city shifted in seconds. Arin slowed. Water darkened the sidewalk, turning the ground slick beneath her shoes. Streetlights reflected in uneven shapes, stretching across the road like wavering lines. She pulled her coat closer, more out of instinct than comfort. This was not the kind of weather people plan for. This was the kind that interrupts. She glanced upward, blinking rain from her lashes, and felt a brief wave of disbelief. Tonight had already demanded effort. Stepping out had taken resolve. Now even the environment seemed to question her timing. She paused beneath the edge of a closed cafe, listening as rain struck metal, glass, and concrete all at once. The noise filled the space around her, leaving little room for thought. Still, she remained there. The rain had changed the night, but it had not erased her reason for showing up. Arin reached for her phone with calm she did not fully feel. The screen glowed bright against the dim street. A short message appeared, followed by another, delayed, then reassigned, then gone. Each update landed with quiet finality. She stared at the screen longer than necessary, as if waiting might change the result. Around her, cars passed slowly, tires cutting through water, headlights flashing by without pause. She tried again. Another request. Another wait. Cancelled. Her shoulders dropped slightly, the effort of staying composed pressing in. She had accounted for nerves. She had accounted for uncertainty. She had not accounted for being stranded between intention and outcome. This was the moment she could turn back. No one would know. No explanation would be required. The rain offered a clean excuse. She could go home, dry off, and tell herself she tried. Her phone slipped back into her bag. The decision lingered unfinished. She stood there as the street emptied further, watching other people disappear into cars or buildings. Each departure made the space feel wider. The night had begun to close in. The street grew quieter in stages. First, the laughter faded. Then the hurried conversations disappeared. One by one, people found cover and moved on, leaving behind a stretch of sidewalk that felt larger than it was. Arin remained beneath the cafe awning, surrounded by movement, yet separate from it. Rain filled the gaps where voices had been. Water streamed along the curb, carrying small scraps of paper and leaves toward the drain. A bus passed without stopping. A car slowed, then continued on. She felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. Being alone in public carried its own weight. There were no walls to lean on, no doors to close, just the awareness of standing still while the world flowed around you. She shifted her bag on her shoulder, suddenly conscious of her posture, her damp hair, the way her dress clung uncomfortably. These details should not have mattered, yet they did. This was not loneliness. It was visibility without connection, the kind that makes you question whether stepping out was a mistake. Still, she did not move. A quiet doubt settled in. It did not arrive harshly. It came in small questions that felt almost practical. Why did you think tonight needed this much effort? Why step out when staying in felt easier? Why expect anything different? Arin shifted her weight, aware of how long she had been standing there. Water gathered at the edge of her shoes. Her hair, styled with care earlier, no longer held its shape. The image she had carried in her mind began to slip. She felt exposed, not embarrassed exactly, more like misplaced. Trying had made her visible. Trying had placed her in the open. There was a particular discomfort in that realization. If she had stayed home, she could have preserved control. Out here, effort showed, hope showed, and hope always felt risky once it had nowhere to hide. She imagined herself walking back the way she came. She pictured the relief of closing her door, changing clothes, returning to the quiet she knew well. That option waited patiently. Yet even as the thought formed, something resisted it. A small steadiness remained beneath the doubt. Feeling foolish did not mean she was wrong. It only meant she had dared to care. Arin let herself feel the moment without judging it. She did not dramatize the inconvenience. She did not turn it into a sign or a failure. She simply acknowledged what stood in front of her. The night had not gone as planned. The effort she made had not been rewarded yet. That awareness stung, but it did not break her. She reminded herself why she had stepped outside in the first place. Not to control the outcome, not to prove anything to anyone. She came because she wanted to practice choosing movement over retreat. Standing there, damp and uncertain, she felt exposed in a clean way. Honest, nothing was being hidden. No story needed editing. This was what showing up sometimes looked like. She allowed the discomfort to pass through her without attaching meaning to it. Feeling unsettled did not mean she had made a mistake. It meant she was present inside the experience. She took a slow breath and relaxed her shoulders. Whatever happened next did not need to justify the choice she already made. That choice had value on its own. For the first time that night, she felt steady again. The footsteps reached her before the voice did. Quick at first, then slowing, shoes striking water with uneven rhythm. Someone else was caught in the rain, moving with the same urgency she had moments earlier. Arin shifted slightly, aware of the narrow space beneath the awning. The man stopped a few feet away. He did not crowd her. He did not rush into speech. He took a breath, glanced at the rain, then offered a small, polite smile. "Looks like we both misjudged tonight," he said. His voice carried ease. Not casual in a careless way. Steady, measured, like someone who chose words rather than filling silence out of habit. Arin turned toward him. "Seems like it." That was all. No follow-up. No attempt to stretch the moment. Silence settled again, but it felt shared, not strained. After a pause, he nodded once, almost to himself. "I'm Pete." "Arin," she replied. The exchange was simple. Names offered without expectation, no questions layered on top, no assumptions built in. Something about that simplicity eased her shoulders. He had acknowledged her presence without asking anything from it. Pete did not shift the energy of the space. He settled into it. He stood with his weight balanced, hands relaxed at his sides, shoulders loose despite the rain darkening his jacket. There was no restless movement, no glancing at his phone, no sign he was waiting for something better to happen. That steadiness reached her before any attraction could. Arin noticed how he looked at the street, rather than at her first, as if allowing the moment to exist without turning it into a performance. When his gaze returned to her, it stayed level, open, unhurried. People often filled silence with urgency. Pete did the opposite. He allowed quiet to stretch without rushing to define it. That alone felt rare. His presence did not ask her to be sharper, quicker, or more impressive. She did not feel examined. She felt included. The rain continued to fall, loud enough to cover pauses. Pete adjusted his stance slightly, giving her room without stepping away. The distance felt intentional, not distant. She realized she was breathing more evenly. Calm, she understood, was not passive. It was chosen. And in that choice, something inside her softened. Pete remained aware of the space between them. Not in a cautious way, in a deliberate one. He did not step closer as the rain pressed in. He did not angle his body to narrow the gap. Instead, he adjusted slightly so they shared the shelter without sharing each other's space. That choice stood out to Aaron. Too often, proximity arrived before permission. People leaned in too quickly, mistaking nearness for interest. Pete did not do that. He treated the distance as something mutual, not something to overcome. When the wind shifted and rain crept under the awning, he moved first, giving her the better cover without comment. The gesture felt natural, not staged. He spoke only when there was something to say. When he listened, he faced her fully, without crowding. His hands stayed visible. His posture stayed open. Nothing about his presence tried to hurry the moment along. Respect, she realized, was not only about words. It showed in restraint, in patience, in the way someone allowed you to arrive at comfort on your own terms. That space made her feel steady. And steadiness, she was learning, created its own kind of pull. Pete's voice stayed even, unaffected by the inconvenience of the night. He did not joke to soften the moment. He did not complain to create connection. When he spoke, his tone carried the same steadiness as his posture, grounded and clear. Arin noticed how he kept his head level while listening. No nodding meant to hurry her along. No exaggerated reactions meant to impress. His attention rested where it should, without weight or pressure. When he shifted his stance, it was subtle. Feet planted, shoulders relaxed. He faced her without angling his body away, but he also did not turn fully toward her as if claiming the interaction. Every movement felt considered. There was a quiet confidence in that restraint, not the kind built from performance, the kind that came from knowing there was no need to prove anything. His hands stayed relaxed, never searching for something to do. His gaze met hers when she spoke, then softened naturally when she paused. She realized how rarely she encountered this kind of presence. Not rehearsed, not eager, just attentive. And in that attention, she felt no need to protect herself. Pete did not arrive with a story prepared. There was no polished charm, no quick humor meant to win her over. Nothing about him reached for attention. Instead, he carried himself as if attention was something to be earned, not taken. That difference mattered. Arin realized she was not measuring herself around him. She was not editing her words or scanning his reactions for approval. The space felt level, equal, quietly balanced. He spoke plainly, without embellishment. When she answered, he received her words without redirecting the focus back to himself. The exchange felt like a shared rhythm, rather than a competition. Safety, she understood, did not announce itself. It revealed itself in what did not happen. No pressure to perform, no rush toward familiarity, no attempt to create intensity where none belonged yet. Pete allowed the moment to stay small, honest, unclaimed. That restraint made the connection feel grounded rather than inflated. She did not feel swept into anything. She felt present inside it. Flash faded quickly. Safety stayed. And for the first time that night, Arin noticed she was no longer thinking about escape routes. Arin did not compare Pete to anyone on purpose. The contrast surfaced on its own. She remembered conversations that moved too fast, questions asked before trust existed, people eager to define things before they understood them, moments where interest felt like expectation rather than curiosity. Standing there now, the difference felt clear. With Pete, nothing was being pulled from her. She did not feel the need to explain herself or smooth out silences. The interaction unfolded at a pace that allowed her to remain fully herself. Past experiences had taught her how quickly attention could become weight, how easily interest could turn into demand. Pete carried none of that. He did not treat the night like an opportunity to seize. He treated it like a moment to share. That shift changed how she experienced herself. She felt lighter, less guarded, more willing to stay present rather than prepare an exit. This was not excitement that rushed ahead of reality. It was comfort settling in quietly. She understood then why safety mattered more than spark. Because when safety led, attraction followed without force. The rain showed no sign of easing. Water slid off the awning in steady streams, collecting along the curb. Arin glanced down the street again, more out of habit than hope. The night had narrowed to this small stretch of shelter, and the sound of rain filling every pause. Pete followed her gaze, then looked the opposite way, as if taking stock of options without urgency. "There's a bookstore around the corner," he said after a moment. The words landed softly. Not as a plan, not as a proposal, just information offered. "It stays open late," he continued. "Old heater. Coffee that tastes like it's been sitting too long. People usually wait out storms there." He did not smile as if expecting agreement. He did not step closer. He kept his eyes on the street, giving her room to receive the idea without feeling watched. Arin pictured it instantly. Warmth, light, a place to stand still without feeling stranded. Pete finally looked back at her. "No pressure," he added, voice unchanged. "If you'd rather head home, that makes sense too." The suggestion felt different from an invitation she had known before. It carried no momentum, no outcome attached, just an open door. Pete did not wait for her answer. That detail mattered. After offering the idea, he shifted his stance slightly, as if releasing ownership of it. His posture stayed open, but his attention loosened. He glanced back toward the rain, then toward the empty street, allowing the moment to breathe. "If not," he said calmly, "you're already doing the brave thing by being out here." There was no persuasion in his tone, no follow-up designed to tip the scale. He spoke as someone comfortable with whatever choice followed. Arin felt the absence of pressure more clearly than its presence. He was not trying to fill the silence. He was not selling the option. He had given her information, then stepped back from it. That restraint created space. In that space, she did not feel rushed. She did not feel watched. She did not feel as though a wrong answer existed. Too often, invitations came with hidden expectations. Agree, and something would be owed. Decline, and something would be lost. Pete's framing removed both outcomes. He was not asking for a yes. He was offering a possibility, and in that difference, Arin felt something settle. She was free to decide based on herself, not on someone else's hopes. Arin did not answer right away. Her mind moved through options with surprising clarity. Going home meant warmth and certainty, familiar walls, dry clothes, a quiet night she could explain to herself without effort. Staying meant uncertainty, conversation without a script, a choice she could not revise once spoken. She noticed how her body responded to each thought. The idea of leaving brought relief first, then a dull heaviness. The idea of staying brought nerves, but also a steady pull she could not ignore. This was the same crossroads she had met before. Leave early and protect comfort. Stay a little longer and risk feeling exposed. She weighed nothing dramatic. No future promises, no imagined outcomes. Only the question of whether she wanted to honor the promise she made before stepping out. Pete waited without looking at her, hands loose at his sides. The lack of urgency gave her room to listen to herself. She realized something quietly important. The fear she felt now was not warning her away. It was reminding her that the moment mattered. and moments that mattered were the ones she had spent too long avoiding. Erin lifted her gaze. The rain continued its steady fall, the street holding its quiet. Nothing around her rushed the moment. No one pushed her toward a choice. That absence made the decision clearer. She thought of the promise she made before leaving home. Not to be fearless, to be honest. Courage, she realized, did not arrive as confidence. It arrived as willingness. Willingness to stay present. Willingness to accept a moment without demanding guarantees. She nodded once, more to herself than to him. "Okay," she said. "I'd like that." Pete turned back toward her, surprised but not triumphant. He smiled gently, as if acknowledging her decision rather than claiming it. "Good," he said. "It's close." They stepped out from under the awning together, rain meeting them immediately. Pete adjusted his jacket slightly in her direction without touching her. The gesture felt instinctive, not deliberate. As they walked, Erin felt the shift inside her. Not excitement alone. Alignment. She had chosen movement again. A small yes. One that felt right. And here's the question for you. If you were standing there, soaked and uncertain, with nothing promised except a warm room and conversation, would you have said yes too? If this moment feels familiar to you, take a second. Like this video, if you believe growth starts with small choices, comment below and tell me honestly. Would you have said yes, or would you have gone home? Your answers matter here. This channel is built on real moments, real decisions, and the quiet courage people rarely talk about. The bookstore welcomed them without ceremony. Light spilled through the windows in a soft glow, steady and calm, a quiet contrast to the street they had just left. The door closed behind them with a gentle sound, cutting off the rain and replacing it with warmth that settled into Erin's shoulders almost immediately. The air carried the scent of paper and old bindings. Shelves stood tall and close, creating narrow paths that felt protective rather than crowded. A few people lingered inside, coats draped over arms, voices low, each absorbed in their own corner of the space. Erin slowed her steps without thinking. The room invited stillness. No one rushed. No one looked twice at them. The world outside felt distant now, as if the storm had been contained at the door. Pete glanced around once, then toward her. "Told you," he said quietly. "It's better inside." She smiled, feeling her breath even out. Heat brushed her skin, drying the edges of discomfort she had been carrying. Her hands relaxed around her bag strap. The tension she had not named began to ease. This place asked nothing of her. It simply held her. And for the first time that night, Erin felt fully present where she stood. The counter sat near the back, tucked between shelves stacked with paperbacks and worn hardcovers. A small machine hummed softly, filling the space with a low, steady sound. The warmth there felt deeper, more settled. Pete stepped forward first, then paused. "What do you like?" he asked, turning toward her. The question held no assumptions, no shorthand. He waited. She considered it, surprised by how rarely anyone asked without adding their own opinion. "Something sweet," she said after a moment. "Nothing strong." He nodded once. "Got it," he ordered simply. Black for himself. He did not comment on her choice. He did not tease or frame it as preference. He paid, then stepped aside, leaving her space at the counter if she wanted it. They waited in silence, listening to the machine work. Erin watched steam rise, the movement slow and unhurried. She realized she felt no urge to fill the gap with conversation. When the cups were ready, Pete handed hers to her carefully, fingers brushing the cardboard sleeve for only a moment. "Careful," he said. "It's hot." She wrapped her hands around the cup, grateful for the warmth seeping into her palms. It was a small exchange, but it felt considered. They found a small table near the window, far enough from the counter to feel private, but close enough to remain part of the room. Rain traced soft lines down the glass, catching the light before slipping out of view. Conversation began without effort, not because they searched for the right topics, but because neither of them rushed to shape it. They spoke about small things first: the bookstore, the weather, how storms changed the mood of the city. Each exchange unfolded naturally, without steering or redirection. Erin noticed how Pete waited before responding, as if allowing her words to land fully. He did not interrupt. He did not finish her sentences. When she paused, he let the silence hold, instead of rushing to fill it. She found herself speaking more than she expected, not because she felt compelled, but because the space felt safe enough to allow it. Laughter appeared briefly, then settled again into quiet. The rhythm felt steady, balanced. No one dominated the exchange. No one performed. They spoke. They listened. They let moments pass without pressure. For the first time that night, Aaron lost track of time. Aaron did not plan to share anything personal. The words surfaced on their own, slipping into the conversation as if they had been waiting for a place to rest. She spoke about her days, about work that kept her steady, but left her wondering when she stopped taking chances. She mentioned how time felt strange lately, moving fast around her while she moved carefully within it. She did not lower her voice. She did not search for the right phrasing. She spoke as she was, without preparing for how it might sound. Pete listened without reacting. That absence of reaction mattered. He did not correct her. He did not reassure her too quickly. He let her thoughts exist without trying to reshape them into something easier. As she talked, Aaron noticed her shoulders loosen, her grip on the cup relaxed. She felt no urge to explain herself further, or soften what she said. "I think I've been careful for so long," she admitted quietly, "that I forgot how to tell when I actually want something." The words surprised her, but they felt true. Saying them out loud did not feel heavy. It felt clean. She realized she was not confessing. She was reflecting. And being heard without interruption allowed the reflection to settle gently, rather than echo back as doubt. Pete did not respond right away. He held her words with care, as if giving them space to finish settling between them. His hands rested around his cup, unmoving. His gaze stayed on her, steady and open, without pressing for more. When he finally spoke, his voice remained even. "That sounds familiar," he said. Not as a claim, as recognition. He did not mirror her story back to her. He did not compare. He stayed with what she shared, acknowledging it without turning it into a lesson or a fix. Aaron noticed how he asked one question at a time. Simple ones, clarifying, not probing. He waited for her answer fully before moving on, letting her set the pace of the conversation. Listening, she realized, was not passive for him. It was active in a quiet way. He stayed present without steering her toward comfort or optimism. He allowed complexity to remain. That kind of attention felt rare. She did not feel managed. She did not feel guided. She felt respected. In that space, she noticed something shift, not intensity, trust. Trust built from being heard without being handled. Pete spoke about himself only when the moment asked for it. He did not offer a history. He shared pieces, chosen carefully. He talked about learning to slow down after years of chasing outcomes that never felt settled, about realizing how often he had mistaken movement for progress. "I used to think clarity came from doing more," he said. "Turns out it came from doing less, but paying attention." He spoke without bitterness, without regret framed as wisdom. His tone stayed grounded, as if the lessons were still active rather than complete. Aaron listened closely. He described how he learned to value steadiness over excitement, how consistency created room for trust, how silence could be generous instead of empty. There was no effort to impress, no attempt to position himself as someone who had figured life out. He spoke as someone still practicing. That honesty resonated with her. She noticed how his words aligned with his presence. Nothing contradicted the way he had shown up since they met. The same restraint, the same patience. Values, she realized, were clearest when they appeared in behavior, not explanation. Their curiosity met in small, careful ways. Pete asked about her interests without pressing for a story behind each one. Aaron asked about his routines without searching for meaning beneath them. Questions stayed open. Answers stayed light enough to breathe. When one topic reached its natural end, neither rushed to replace it. They allowed pauses to settle, letting the room carry the silence without discomfort. The quiet felt companionable, not empty. Aaron noticed how curiosity did not demand access. It invited presence. She did not feel studied. She felt seen as she was, not as a puzzle to solve. Pete mirrored that approach. When she answered, he accepted the response without pushing for depth she had not offered. When he shared, she received it without pulling for more detail. They smiled at the same moments. They let laughter rise and fall without forcing it to linger. The exchange felt balanced, each of them moving forward only when the other was ready. This was not intimacy built from disclosure. It was intimacy built from respect. And in that shared restraint, interest deepened naturally, steady and unclaimed. They stepped outside together, the door closing softly behind them. The rain had changed its mind. What once fell heavy now touched the ground lightly, leaving the street washed and reflective rather than loud. The air felt cooler, calmer, as if the night had settled after releasing its tension. Erin paused for a moment, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. Pete waited without comment, giving her the space to move at her own pace. The street stretched ahead of them, quieter than before, lit by evenly spaced lamps that cast gentle pools of light along the sidewalk. They began to walk. Their steps fell into an easy rhythm, neither rushing nor lagging behind. Rain no longer demanded attention. It existed in the background, soft enough to let other sensations rise. The faint sound of water along the curb, the distant hum of a passing car, the quiet awareness of another person walking beside you. Erin felt the shift inside her chest. The urgency from earlier had eased. What remained was steadiness. The night no longer felt like something to endure. It felt like something to move through. And with each step forward, the choice she made earlier felt affirmed, not through words but through calm. As they walked, Erin became aware of her body in a new way, not self-conscious, attentive. Her shoulders loosened with each step. Her breathing matched the pace of her feet on the pavement. She noticed the gentle sway of her bag, the warmth still lingering in her hands from the coffee cup she no longer held. Pete walked beside her, close enough to register, far enough to respect. Their arms moved naturally, sometimes drifting nearer, sometimes apart again, never colliding, never retreating too quickly. The space between them felt alive, responsive. She noticed small details. The sound of his shoes against the wet ground, the way he adjusted his stride to match hers without making it obvious, the subtle awareness that he was paying attention without tracking her every move. When their shoulders brushed lightly for the first time, neither reacted. No apology, no comment. The contact passed as naturally as it arrived. That moment stayed with her. It was not charged. It was acknowledged. Her body registered safety first, then interest followed quietly. Not urgency, not hunger, just awareness growing clearer with each shared step. Attraction, she realized, did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it settled in gently, once the body felt at ease. Silence found them without effort. Not the kind that asked to be filled. The kind that settled in naturally, like a shared understanding neither of them felt the need to interrupt. Their steps continued in rhythm, the sound steady and unremarkable. Erin noticed how rarely silence felt this easy. Usually, quiet demanded explanation. A joke, a question, proof of interest. Here, it asked for nothing. It existed as part of the walk, as normal as the streetlights passing overhead. Pete did not reach for conversation to keep momentum. He allowed the quiet to stand, trusting it to hold its own. That trust made the space feel grounded rather than empty. Erin felt her thoughts slow. She was not rehearsing responses. She was not wondering what came next. She was simply there, aware of the present moment and the person beside her. Every few steps, their awareness brushed against each other without contact. A glance, a small smile, then back to the path ahead. Silence, she realized, could be generous. It could say enough without words. And in that shared quiet, connection deepened without pressure, steady and unforced. The awareness arrived gradually, not as a rush, not as a shift she could name. It settled in as a quiet recognition that something had changed since they left the bookstore. Erin noticed how often her attention returned to Pete without effort, how easily she registered his presence beside her, how natural it felt to adjust her pace when his slowed, and how instinctively he did the same. Their hands moved closer now, sometimes separated by only a few inches. The space carried weight, not from urgency, but from restraint. Both of them aware, both of them choosing not to cross it without intention. She felt the pull clearly, and she felt the respect holding it in place. That balance created tension without discomfort, interest without pressure, want without demand. She realized this was what she had been missing before, not attraction, but safety within attraction. They reached a corner where the light lingered longer, the street opening ahead of them. Pete slowed slightly, giving her time to catch up. Their shoulders brushed again, more deliberate this time, and neither moved away. Arin felt steady in her choice. Whatever came next, it would not be rushed. It would be chosen. And that understanding made the connection feel real, grounded, and worth honoring. They slowed without speaking. The streetlight ahead cast a steady glow across the sidewalk, bright enough to soften the dark without drawing attention to itself. Pete reduced his pace first, then came to a stop just beneath it. Arin matched him a step later, sensing the shift before he said anything. He did not block her path. He did not step closer. He simply turned toward her, giving the moment shape through stillness. The rain had nearly stopped now. Only a faint trace remained in the air, cool against her skin. The street felt open, quiet, held. Pete took a breath, measured and calm. His hands stayed relaxed at his sides. His posture stayed open, grounded. Arin felt the pause settle between them. This was not hesitation. This was intention. Stopping here felt deliberate, as if he had chosen the light because it allowed clarity. Nothing hidden, nothing rushed. Just a shared space where words could land cleanly. She met his gaze, aware of her own heartbeat, steady but present. Whatever he was about to say mattered, not because it would decide everything, but because it would define how the moment moved forward. She waited, and in that waiting, she felt respected before a single word was spoken. Pete spoke slowly, as if choosing accuracy over speed. "I want to say something clearly," he began. His voice stayed steady, not lowered, not softened to create effect. "This night has felt good, easy. I don't want to blur that by moving faster than it deserves." He held her gaze without intensity, without asking for agreement. "I'm not expecting anything," he continued. "Not tonight, not beyond it. If this ends as a walk and a conversation, that's enough." The words landed with weight, not because they limited the moment, but because they protected it. He did not frame the boundary as restraint he was imposing on himself. He framed it as respect he was offering to both of them. No conditions attached, no future implied. Arin felt the difference immediately. Boundaries she had known before often felt like withdrawal or control. This felt like clarity, like someone naming the edge of the moment so neither of them had to guess. Pete took a small step back, barely noticeable, reinforcing the choice with action. "I just want you to feel free to decide what you want," he said. Without pressure, the space between them held steady, and for the first time, desire felt safer because it had room to breathe. Pete did not stop at the boundary. He explained it. "Sometimes," he said, "I've mistaken closeness for progress. I don't want to do that here." He did not present the thought as a confession. There was no heaviness in it, just clarity offered without defense. His honesty felt practiced, like something he had learned through attention rather than regret. "I've learned that when something matters," he continued, "it deserves time, space, the chance to stay honest instead of intense." Arin noticed how he spoke about himself, without turning the moment inward. He did not list mistakes. He did not compare past experiences. He named a lesson and let it stand on its own. That restraint made the truth easier to receive. She could hear the care behind his words. Not care meant to impress. Care meant to protect what was unfolding, rather than rush it toward an outcome. His honesty did not shrink the moment. It steadied it. By naming his values out loud, he removed uncertainty. She did not have to wonder what he wanted or where he stood. He had placed it in the open, where nothing needed decoding. Trust, she realized, grew fastest when truth arrived early. Arin felt the weight of his words settle gently, not as caution, as permission. She took a breath, noticing how calm she felt. There was no disappointment rising in her chest, no frustration. Instead, something steadier took its place. "Thank you for saying that," she said. Her voice did not shake. She did not rush to fill the space his honesty created. She let the moment stand as it was. "I don't feel limited by what you said," she added, after a pause. "I feel clear." That clarity surprised her. She had expected desire to demand more, to push forward. Instead, it felt anchored, grounded by respect. She stepped a little closer, closing part of the distance without crossing it fully. The choice felt deliberate, not reactive. "I want to be here," she said. "I just don't want to pretend this moment means more than it needs to yet." Pete nodded once, understanding passing between them without further explanation. They stood beneath the streetlight, rain nearly gone, the night holding still around them. Desire remained present, but trust had taken the lead, and for Aaron, that made the moment feel not smaller, but stronger. They did not move right away. The space between them felt deliberate now, shaped by everything already said. Pete's attention stayed on her face, steady and patient, as if waiting for something only she could give. "Is this okay?" he asked quietly. The question carried no assumption. It did not lean forward. It did not pull. It stayed where it was, offering her the center of the moment. Aaron felt the clarity of it settle in her chest. No guessing, no reading between lines, just a choice placed fully in her hands. She nodded once, then added words of her own. "Yes, I want this." Pete acknowledged the answer with a small breath, almost a release. He did not move yet. He let her certainty land, letting the moment remain mutual rather than claimed. Only then did he lift his hand, slow enough that she could follow every inch of the movement. He stopped again, just short of touching her, waiting one last beat. She stepped closer. The consent was not a single moment. It was continuous, clear, shared, and in that shared understanding, the space between them finally began to close. Pete moved with care. Nothing rushed forward. Nothing claimed space without invitation. His hand settled at her waist lightly, resting there as if to confirm presence rather than pull her closer. The contact felt steady, warm, and deliberate. Aaron responded by stepping in, closing the last distance on her own. Her body aligned with his, not pressed, not urgent, just near enough to feel shared warmth, near enough to recognize how calm she felt. Their foreheads met first. Breath slowed. The world narrowed to simple awareness. The cool air on her cheeks, the warmth at her side, the quiet certainty of being exactly where she chose to be. When their lips finally met, the contact was gentle, soft, unhurried. There was no search for depth, no attempt to take more than the moment offered. The kiss stayed present, held in place by intention, rather than desire pushing ahead. Aaron noticed how easily she stayed grounded. No racing thoughts. No need to brace herself. Her hands rested naturally, one lightly against his jacket, the other relaxed at her side. The closeness did not overwhelm her. It steadied her. And that steadiness allowed the moment to deepen without losing its calm. Aaron became aware of small details first. The faint sound of rain settling into the pavement. The way the streetlight held them in a quiet circle. The steady warmth where Pete's hand rested, firm without weight. She noticed how the night seemed to slow around them. The kiss remained gentle, unfolding at a pace that allowed her to stay present inside it. She felt the texture of his jacket beneath her fingers, slightly damp from the walk, still warm from his body. She felt the ease in his posture, the absence of tension, the care in how he stayed attentive to her movement. Nothing blurred, nothing rushed. Her senses stayed clear. The cool air brushed her skin. His breath stayed even. When he shifted slightly, it was to match her, not to lead her somewhere else. She realized how rarely moments like this felt simple. There was no urgency pulling at her, no voice in her head asking what came next. The kiss existed on its own, complete without needing to become anything more. That simplicity allowed her to relax fully into the experience. She was not disappearing inside it. She was fully herself within it, and that made every sensation feel honest, grounded, and safe. When they finally eased apart, the closeness did not disappear. It stayed in the space between them, steady and unhurried. Pete did not hold on longer than needed. He did not step away too fast. He remained where he was, allowing Aaron to stay connected to the moment rather than be pulled out of it. She felt calm, not lightheaded, not overwhelmed, calm in a way that felt earned. Her body stayed relaxed. Her thoughts stayed clear. She did not feel rushed toward meaning or future. She felt grounded in what had already happened. Pete searched her face briefly, not for approval, but for presence. When he saw it, he nodded slightly, as if acknowledging something shared rather than claimed. Aaron realized then what made this moment different. She did not feel changed by him, She felt affirmed by herself. She had chosen to stay. She had chosen to speak. She had chosen to move forward without abandoning her sense of safety. The kiss did not mark an ending or a beginning. It marked alignment. And standing there beneath the fading rain, Aaron understood that feeling safe did not lessen desire. It allowed desire to exist without fear. Aaron walked home by herself. The street felt different now. Quieter, not because the city had changed, but because she had. Her steps stayed unhurried, measured, as if she wanted to remain inside the night a little longer without stretching it into something else. Water reflected the lights in soft shapes along the pavement. The air felt clean. She adjusted her coat, aware of the warmth still lingering at her side, where Pete's hand had rested earlier. She did not reach for her phone. There was no urge to replay messages or search for confirmation. The silence around her felt complete, not empty. Each step grounded her further into the present, into her own body, into the choice she had made to keep walking forward when it would have been easier to retreat. Being alone did not feel like absence. It felt like ownership. She noticed her posture. Upright, relaxed. She noticed how steady her breathing remained. There was no rush to define the night before it had fully settled. Walking home alone did not undo what had happened. It honored it. And for the first time in a long while, solitude felt like strength rather than distance. Clarity arrived quietly. It did not announce itself as relief or excitement. It settled as understanding. Aaron noticed how her thoughts no longer raced ahead. There was no urge to replay every moment or measure what it meant. She felt calm about what had happened, because nothing needed interpretation. The night had given her presence, not confusion. She knew how she felt without needing to label it further. The steadiness surprised her. She had expected emotion to swell or scatter. Instead, it stayed grounded, anchored in the choices she had made along the way. She understood what she liked. She understood what she wanted to protect. That understanding felt complete on its own. For once, she did not question whether she had done too much or too little. The moment did not feel fragile. It felt finished in the best sense, whole without needing extension. Clarity, she realized, did not come from answers about the future. It came from alignment in the present. She had not abandoned herself to stay connected. She had stayed connected without losing herself. That balance stayed with her as she continued home, light and certain, in equal measure. Aaron did not build a future on the walk home. She did not imagine dates unfolding in neat order or conversations stretching months ahead. She did not turn the night into a promise it had never made. That restraint felt new. In the past, moments like this often carried pressure to mean more than they were ready to hold. Hope rushed ahead, filling silence with expectation. Tonight stayed grounded because she allowed it to remain exactly what it was. A good night, an honest moment, a shared choice. She respected that. There was comfort in not reaching forward too quickly. No story needed finishing. No outcome needed protecting. The night stood complete without projection. She understood something important then. Meaning did not come from certainty about what followed. It came from the integrity of what had already happened. By not attaching the moment to a future she could not predict, she preserved its truth. She let it remain clean, unburdened by imagined paths or quiet demands. If they spoke again, it would be because both wanted to. If they did not, the night would still matter. That understanding felt freeing, and it allowed her to carry the experience with gratitude rather than expectation. Pride met her a few blocks from home. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that settles into your chest when you realize you did something hard without needing an audience. Aaron felt it as she slowed at a corner, waiting for the light to change, hands tucked into her coat. She replayed the night, not to analyze it, but to acknowledge herself within it. She had gone out when staying in felt safer. She had spoken honestly without oversharing. She had chosen presence instead of retreat. Those choices mattered more to her than how the night looked from the outside. For a long time, she had measured progress by outcomes, results, clear next steps. Tonight offered none of that, and yet she felt fuller than she had in weeks. She recognized the shift. Confidence had not arrived because someone liked her. It arrived because she trusted herself. She trusted her pace. She trusted her boundaries. She trusted her ability to stay true to what felt right. That trust stayed with her as she reached her building, keys cool in her hand. Pride did not rush her forward. It stood quietly beside her, earned and steady. What changed was not the night. It was Aaron. She unlocked her door and stepped inside, pausing before turning on the light. The quiet greeted her without judgment. Nothing felt missing. Nothing felt unfinished. She understood then what the night had given her. Not romance as a reward, not certainty about what came next. It gave her proof. Proof that she could step forward without losing herself. Proof that she could sit inside uncertainty without needing to control it. Proof that courage did not require perfection, timing, or approval. She had spent so long waiting for the right conditions to begin. Tonight showed her that beginning was the condition. What really changed was how she saw herself. She was no longer someone preparing to live. She was already doing it. And before we move on, pause here for a moment. Think about your own first brave choice. The moment you stopped waiting and decided to show up, even without guarantees. If this part of the story spoke to you, like this video, comment and share the moment that changed how you saw yourself. Share this story with someone who might need that reminder tonight. Sometimes, one honest step is enough to change everything. A few days passed, quietly and without announcement. Life resumed its usual rhythm. Morning light through the window. Familiar streets. Workdays that asked for focus and routine. Nothing on the surface suggested anything had shifted. Yet Aaron felt the difference immediately. She moved through her days with a steadiness that had not been there before. Not excitement, not distraction. Just a calm awareness that stayed with her as she folded laundry, answered emails, and stood in line for coffee. The night returned to her thoughts at unexpected moments. Not as a question. As a reminder, she did not replay it for meaning. She remembered it for truth. What surprised her most was how little she needed to explain it to herself. The experience had settled fully, without loose ends or unfinished emotion. A few days later, the night still mattered. Not because it lingered loudly, because it had landed honestly. Aaron returned to her routines without resistance. She woke early, moved through her mornings with intention, and showed up fully to the responsibilities she had always handled well. From the outside, nothing about her life appeared altered. Inside, everything felt more settled. She noticed how she carried herself differently. Her shoulders stayed relaxed. Her thoughts stayed present. She no longer questioned her pace or second-guessed small decisions. Conversations flowed more easily. She listened without distraction. She spoke without filtering every word through doubt. Even silence felt comfortable in ways it had not before. There was no rush to chase change, no urge to prove growth. She felt grounded in herself, comfortable with the space she occupied. The night had not disrupted her life. It had integrated into it. Daily routines no longer felt like placeholders for something else. They felt like parts of a life already in motion. And that made all the difference. The confidence did not arrive as boldness. It showed up as ease. Aaron noticed it in small moments. The way she answered questions without overthinking. The way she trusted her first response instead of revising it later. The way she no longer measured herself against timelines that were never hers to begin with. She felt anchored. Not because something had been won, because something had been claimed. Her choices felt like her own again, guided by awareness rather than caution. She no longer waited for reassurance before moving forward. She allowed herself to try, to pause, to decide, all without judgment. That shift changed how she saw everything else. Work felt lighter. Time felt less personal. Comparison lost its hold. Confidence, she realized, was not about certainty. It was about alignment. She trusted herself to show up honestly, even when outcomes remained open. And that trust stayed with her, steady and unforced, long after the night had passed. The message arrived in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. No build-up, no urgency. Her phone buzzed once while she stood at her kitchen counter, the room filled with quiet. "Hi, Aaron. I've been thinking about that night. I hope your week has been good. If you ever feel like another walk or coffee, I'd enjoy that. No pressure at all." She read it once. Then again. What stayed with her was not the invitation itself. It was the tone. Calm. Direct. Considerate. The same presence he had shown her from the beginning. There was no assumption hidden in the words. No expectation tucked between the lines. Just openness, offered, and then released. Arin smiled, not because she felt pulled toward a decision, but because she felt respected inside it. She did not reply right away. Not out of hesitation, out of comfort. The message did not demand speed. It allowed choice to remain exactly where it belonged. Arin set her phone down and returned to what she was doing. There was no urgency pulling her toward a reply. No pressure to define anything. The night had already given her what she needed. Everything else could arrive in its own time. She understood the truth clearly now. That night mattered because she showed up for herself. Because she chose honesty over hesitation. Because she stepped forward without demanding guarantees. Whether she met Pete again or not did not change that. The meaning stayed intact, grounded in the choice she made and the trust she built within herself. And that is where this story rests. If this journey felt real to you, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share what part stayed with you. Subscribe if you want more stories about real choices, quiet courage, and love that grows with respect. This channel is a home for stories that move slowly, honestly, and with heart. Thank you for being here.